She traded true love for a price tag, but she never bothered to check who actually owned the fortune. Georgia had it all. A husband who worshipped her and a beautiful son. But it wasn't enough. She was young, beautiful, and dangerously greedy. She despised Daniel's honest, simple life. So she did the unthinkable. She abandoned her family to run off with Chris, a man who promised her mansions, diamonds, and the high life. She thought she had won the lottery. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. While Daniel turned his heartbreak into fuel, building a real empire from nothing, Georgia was about to discover a terrifying secret. The man she left her family for wasn't who he said he was. When the true owner of the mansion walks through the door, Georgia's world collapses instantly. Homeless and broken, she crawls back to the man she destroyed, only to face a tragedy that no amount of money can fix. This is a story about why greed is a slow death. You won't believe the final twist in the will. Watch until the very last second. Please subscribe. Daniel, a handsome 35-year-old American, worked a modest administrative job. He was a man of immense integrity. His world revolved around his 10-year-old son, Jacob, and his wife, Georgia. Georgia was 20, blonde, slim, and breathtakingly beautiful. However, she was deeply unhappy. She despised their lower-middle-class life, constantly pressuring Daniel to earn more. She dreamed of mansions and supercars, while Daniel cherished their simple, honest life. "Honesty is our wealth," Daniel would say. "Honesty is poverty," Georgia would retort. "I want real money." The test of his character arrived on a Tuesday. A developer entered Daniel's office seeking approval for an illegal land project. He placed $50,000 in cash on the desk. "Sign the paper," the man said. "No one will know." Daniel knew it was wrong. It violated safety codes and his own principles. But as he looked at the money, he didn't see corruption. He saw Georgia. He imagined her finally smiling, finally loving him the way he loved her. The silence of his conscience was deafening as he signed the document. He took the cash, his hands trembling. He left work and immediately went shopping. He bought extravagant gifts, expensive jewelry for Georgia and piles of toys for Jacob. When he arrived home, Georgia's eyes widened with pure greed. She tore into the boxes, squealing with delight as she held up a silk dress. "Where did you get $50,000? She asked, clutching a gold necklace. Daniel confessed. He sat her down and told her about the illegal deal and the bribe. He expected her to be afraid or morally conflicted. Instead, she hugged him tighter than ever. "Good," she whispered, her eyes shining. "You finally did the right thing. Now we can actually live." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. While Georgia slept peacefully with her new treasures, Daniel stared into the darkness. The money felt like poison in his house. His honesty, temporarily suppressed by his love for her, returned to haunt him. He realized he had sold his soul for her smile, and the guilt was crushing him. He knew, lying there in the dark, that this was a terrible mistake. The morning sun didn't bring warmth to Daniel. It brought clarity. He woke up with a heavy weight in his chest. The $50,000 hidden in the closet felt like a bomb ticking away his integrity. He looked at Georgia, sleeping soundly with a smile on her face, a smile he had bought with dirty money. He couldn't do it. His conscience, the core of who he was, screamed that this was wrong. "I have to return it," he whispered to the empty room. Quietly, so as not to wake her, he packed the cash back into the heavy envelope. He gathered the receipts for the jewelry and toys. He was going to undo it all. Georgia woke up just as he was leaving. "Where are you going so early?" she asked, stretching lazily. "To fix a mistake," he said vaguely, kissing her forehead. At the office, Daniel moved with desperate speed. He intercepted the paperwork before it went to the final registry. He called the developer immediately. When the man arrived, confused and irritated, Daniel slid the thick envelope across the desk. "I can't do this," Daniel said firmly. I revoked the approval. Take your money. I won't risk lives for this. The developer sneered. You're a fool, Daniel. You're throwing away a fortune. I'm keeping my soul, Daniel replied. He walked out, feeling lighter than he had in 24 hours, but he knew the hardest part was yet to come. When he walked into his apartment that evening, Georgia was waiting. She was looking at real estate brochures, planning their new life. Daniel sat her down, his hands shaking slightly. I gave the money back, he said quietly. The silence was instant and terrifying. Georgia's face shifted from anticipation to pure, unadulterated rage. The beautiful, loving wife from the night before vanished. You did what? She screamed, her voice shrill. It was illegal, Georgia. It was wrong. We can be happy without stealing. Happy. She stood up and threw the brochures at him. You had a chance to change our lives. You had a chance to make me a queen, and you threw it away because of your stupid conscience. You are weak, Daniel. You are a coward. From that moment, the house became a war zone. Georgia stopped smiling. She treated him with icy silence or biting sarcasm. She looked at him with disgust, as if his honesty were a disease. She refused to speak to him during dinner, leaving Daniel and Jacob to eat in awkward silence. Weeks passed in this cold tension until an invitation arrived. It was a gold-embossed card for a high society charity gala. Georgia saw it and her eyes lit up for the first time in forever. We are going, she declared. I need to be around real people. Successful people. Daniel agreed, hoping a night out would heal the rift. He didn't know he was walking into a trap. He didn't know that tonight, they would meet Chris, a man who would see the greed in Georgia's eyes and use it to destroy everything Daniel had left. The venue for the gala was the Grand Sterling Hotel, a place where the air itself smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a golden glow over the city's elite. Daniel felt like an imposter the moment he stepped onto the plush red carpet. His suit was clean and pressed, but the fabric was cheap, and the cut was outdated. He adjusted his tie nervously, feeling the judgmental eyes of the wealthy patrons sliding over him. Beside him, however, Georgia looked as if she had been born for this life. She wore the emerald silk dress Daniel had bought with the bribe money, the one item she had tearfully refused to return. It hugged her slim figure perfectly, and her blonde hair cascaded down her back in soft, golden waves. She didn't look like the wife of a clerk. She looked like a movie star. But it wasn't just her beauty that shone. It was her hunger. Georgia's eyes darted around the room, drinking in the sight of diamond necklaces, bespoke tuxedos, and the casual arrogance of people who had never worried about an electric bill. Relax, Daniel, she whispered, pinching his arm. Stop looking so small. We deserve to be here. It was then that the atmosphere in the room shifted. A hush fell over the crowd near the entrance as a man walked in. It was Chris. At 40 years old, he was the embodiment of power. Tall, broad-shouldered, and devastatingly handsome in a way that felt predatory, Chris moved through the crowd not like a guest, but like the owner of the world. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry known for his ruthless business tactics, but among the whispers of high society, he was known for something else, his insatiable lust. He was a collector of beautiful things, and he didn't care if those things belonged to someone else. Chris accepted handshakes with a bored expression, his eyes scanning the room for entertainment. Then, his gaze landed on Georgia. He stopped mid-sentence. He didn't see a person. He saw a challenge. He saw the breathtaking beauty, yes, but more importantly, he saw the discontent in her eyes. He recognized the look of a bird desperate to escape its cage. He made a beeline for them, parting the crowd with ease. Daniel instinctively stepped closer to his wife, sensing a threat, but Georgia leaned forward, her lips parting in a welcoming smile. Good evening, Chris said, his voice a deep, smooth baritone. He ignored Daniel completely, taking Georgia's hand and bringing it to his lips. I don't believe we've met. I am Chris. And you are surely the most stunning creature in this room. I'm Georgia, she breathed, her face flushing with a mix of flattery and ambition. And this is my husband, Daniel. Chris finally flicked his eyes toward Daniel. The look was dismissive, cold, and assessing. Husband. I see. You are a lucky man, Daniel. I hope you know what you have. I do, Daniel said stiffly. We are just leaving. Nonsense, Chris laughed, signaling a waiter to bring champagne. The night is young. Tell me, Daniel, what do you do that affords you such a jewel of a wife? I work in city administration, Daniel replied, his grip on his glass tightening. Chris chuckled, a sound that lacked any warmth. Administration. Bureaucracy. How noble. He turned his back slightly to Daniel, effectively boxing him out, and focused his charm on Georgia. He complimented her dress, her hair, her laugh. He asked about her life, and when she mentioned Jacob, he didn't recoil. Instead, he saw another lever to pull. A son? 10 years old. Chris smiled. I love children. I was just thinking, my company needs a new vice president of operations. High salary, company car, travel perks. Daniel, you seem like an honest man. I could use an honest man. The starting salary is $200,000 a year. Georgia gasped. She grabbed Daniel's arm, her nails digging in. Daniel! Did you hear that? Daniel looked into Chris's eyes. He didn't see a job offer. He saw a transaction. Chris wasn't buying an employee. He was buying access. He was buying the husband's silence so he could play with the wife. I appreciate the offer, Daniel said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. But I am not qualified for that role. And I am happy where I am. The rejection hung in the air. Georgia looked at Daniel with horror. Chris, however, just smiled. It was the smile of a wolf that had found a gap in the fence. Loyalty, Chris mused, looking at Georgia. A rare trait. But sometimes, loyalty is just a nice word for fear of success. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, limited edition gold pen. He handed it to Georgia. For the boy. For Jacob. A little souvenir. We can't accept this, Daniel started. Keep it, Chris commanded softly, his eyes locking with Georgia's. Think of it as a promise of what could be. As they walked away later that night, Daniel felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. He saw the way Georgia clutched the gold pen. He saw the faraway look in her eyes. Chris hadn't just flirted with her. He had infected her. He had shown her the peak of the mountain, and now, Daniel's honest valley looked like a prison. The hunter had set his trap, and Daniel knew with heartbreaking certainty that his wife was already walking willingly into it. The days following the gala were not filled with the silence of peace, but the silence of a gathering storm. The small apartment, once a sanctuary of modest love, now felt like a prison cell to Georgia. The gold pen Chris had given Jacob sat on the boys' nightstand like a totem of a life they couldn't afford. A shiny, mocking reminder of what lay outside their walls. Chris did not wait. He was a predator who sensed blood in the water, and he began a relentless campaign of seduction. He didn't attack with force. He attacked with generosity. It started on a Wednesday. A delivery truck pulled up to their curb, blocking the view of the street. Two men in uniforms unloaded a massive, state-of-the-art entertainment system, the kind usually found in private theater rooms. It was addressed to Jacob. Daniel stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. We didn't order this. Take it back. It's already paid for, sir, the delivery man said, checking his clipboard. Compliments of Mr. Chris Sterling. I don't care, Daniel snapped, his voice shaking with anger. We are not accepting charity from him. Take it back. No. Georgia's voice cut through the air like a whip. She pushed past Daniel, her eyes wide with excitement. Are you crazy? This is for Jacob. You want to take this away from your own son just because of your fragile ego. It's not ego, Georgia. He's buying us. Daniel pleaded, gripping her shoulders. He is trying to humiliate me. He wants you, and he's using our son to get to you. Georgia shook him off with a look of pure disdain. Maybe he just wants to see us happy, Daniel. Something you haven't been able to do in 5 years. She signed the delivery slip, and as the massive box was carried inside, Daniel felt the foundation of his authority as a father and husband crack. Jacob was ecstatic, hugging his mother, oblivious to the fact that his new toy was a bribe for his mother's soul. The gifts didn't stop. Designer clothes arrived for Georgia. Expensive watches. Invitations to private luncheons. Daniel tried to forbid it. He banned Chris's name in the house. He blocked the number on the landline. But he couldn't block the hunger in Georgia's heart. She began to disappear. It started with errands that took hours. Then, she would come home smelling of expensive wine and a cologne that wasn't Daniel's. One rainy evening, Daniel came home early to find Georgia getting dressed. She was wearing a new dress, one he hadn't bought, slipping diamond earrings into her lobes. She looked breathtaking, but she looked like a stranger. "Where are you going?" Daniel asked, his voice hollow. "Chris invited me to dinner," she said casually, applying lipstick in the mirror. "Just to talk about potential opportunities for you. Since you're too proud to ask." "I told you not to see him," Daniel said, stepping between her and the door. "Georgia, look at me. He is a billionaire playboy. He is known for this. He destroys marriages for sport. He sees lust, not love. He will use you and throw you away." Georgia turned to him, and her eyes were cold, void of the warmth he used to know. "Use me? Or appreciate me? He treats me like a queen, Daniel. He listens to my dreams. He doesn't tell me to be content with being poor. He tells me I was made for greatness. I love you." Daniel cried out, tears stinging his eyes. "I work every day for you. I gave up $50,000 of dirty money to keep our souls clean. Doesn't that mean anything?" Georgia laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "That money could have been the start of something. Instead you chose your pride. You call it honesty. I call it failure. Chris says you are holding me back like an anchor. Chris says. Chris says." Daniel grabbed her hands. "I am your husband, not him." She yanked her hands away. "Then start acting like a man who can provide for his wife. Until then, don't tell me what to do." She walked out the door, the click of her heels echoing like gunshots in the hallway. Daniel rushed to the window and watched. A long, black limousine was waiting in the rain. A driver held an umbrella for her as she slid into the back seat. Through the tinted glass, Daniel saw a silhouette lean forward to greet her. "Chris." Daniel slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He buried his face in his hands. He could fight poverty. He could fight exhaustion. But he couldn't fight a phantom promise of wealth. The fracture was complete. She hadn't physically left the house for good yet, but her heart had already moved into the mansion on the hill. She was trading a man who would die for her for a man who only wanted to own her. And there was nothing Daniel could do but wait for the final shatter. The end of their marriage didn't happen with a shout or a bang. It happened with the sharp metallic zip of a suitcase closing. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the sky outside a bruised purple of impending rain. Daniel had come home early, a knot of dread in his stomach that had become his constant companion. He found Georgia in their bedroom. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was moving with a terrifying cold efficiency. Her closet was open, stripped bare of the designer clothes Chris had bought her. 3 large Louis Vuitton trunks, gifts from Chris, sat open on the bed, swallowing the life she had built with Daniel. "Georgia!" Daniel's voice cracked. He stood in the doorway, his hands hanging limp at his sides. "What are you doing?" She didn't look up as she folded a silk scarf. I'm leaving, Daniel. I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that this struggle is enough for me. Leaving. Daniel took a step forward, panic rising in his chest like bile. For him? For Chris? Georgia, he's playing a game. You're just a pawn to him. Georgia finally looked at him. Her eyes were dry and hard. He treats me like a prize, Daniel. You treat me like a partner in poverty. I'm tired of counting pennies. I'm tired of waiting for you to make it. Chris offers me the world now. We have a son. Daniel shouted, the desperation breaking through. You can't just leave Jacob. He's 10 years old. He needs his mother. He needs a mother who isn't miserable, she retorted, snapping the lock on the final trunk. He'll be fine. You're the good parent, right? You raise him. I'll send money. I'll send him things he could never dream of. At that moment, the front door clicked open. Jacob walked in, his backpack sliding off his shoulder. He looked at the suitcases, then at his father's tear-streaked face, and finally at his mother. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a heart. Mommy. Jacob's voice was small, trembling. Are we going on a trip? Georgia froze for a split second, a flicker of pain crossing her face, but she shoved it down instantly. She walked past her son, signaling to the two burly men who had appeared in the hallway, Chris's security, to take the bags. No, Jacob, she said, not kneeling to hug him, not looking him in the eye. Mommy is going away for a while. To live in a big house. Can I come? Jacob stepped forward, reaching for her hand. No, she said sharply, pulling her hand away as if his touch burned. You stay here with Daddy. You belong here. Jacob burst into tears, a guttural wailing sound that echoed off the thin walls. He ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her legs. Mommy, don't go. Please. I'll be good. I won't ask for toys. Don't go. Daniel rushed forward, pulling his sobbing son away, holding him tight against his chest to stop him from chasing a woman who didn't want to be caught. Georgia didn't look back. She walked out the door, the click of her heels growing fainter, leaving a trail of expensive perfume that smelled like betrayal. Outside, the black limousine was waiting. Chris didn't even get out of the car. He sat in the back, sipping scotch, watching the scene unfold with a detached amusement. As Georgia slid in beside him, breathless and pale, he didn't ask if she was okay. He simply tapped the glass for the driver to move. You did the right thing, Chris murmured, running a hand through her hair possessively. You don't belong in the gutter, baby. You belong on a pedestal. The transition to her new life was jarringly swift. Georgia was moved into a penthouse suite at the finest hotel in the city while Chris prepared his estate. She was showered with luxury. Spa days, galas, jewelry that cost more than Daniel's lifetime earnings. She felt like a queen. But the cracks appeared quickly. One evening, lying in the massive king-sized bed, Georgia turned to Chris. When are we going to make it official, Chris? When can I meet your family? When do we get married? Chris laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was dismissive. He took a sip of his drink and didn't look at her. Marriage? Why ruin a good thing with contracts, Georgia? Look at what you have. You have the money. You have the freedom. Why do you need a piece of paper? Just enjoy the ride. But I left my husband for you. I left my son, she whispered, a seed of terror planting itself in her gut. And I appreciate the sacrifice, Chris said coldly, turning off the bedside lamp. But don't be clingy. It's not attractive. I bought you the life you wanted. Don't ask for more. Back in the small, silent apartment, Daniel sat on the edge of Jacob's bed. The boy had finally cried himself to sleep, clutching the pillow where his mother used to lay her head. Daniel smoothed the hair back from his son's forehead, his own heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. He felt a profound loneliness, a void that threatened to swallow him whole. But as he looked at his son, a new resolve hardened in his chest. "I won't let you fall, Jacob," Daniel whispered into the darkness. "She chose gold. We will choose each other." He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, his wife was sleeping in silk sheets, sold to a man who saw her as an object. Daniel was alone, poor and broken, but as he stood there, the tears finally stopped. The mourning was over. The survival had begun. The months that followed George's departure were a blur of gray struggle. Daniel moved through his life like a machine, fueled only by the need to protect Jacob. But the nights were the hardest. In the silence of the apartment, the ghost of his marriage haunted him. He looked at the peeling paint, the worn carpet, and the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. He realized with a bitter clarity that his honesty, while noble, had left him defenseless against a world that worshipped gold. Georgia hadn't just left him. She had been purchased. One rainy Tuesday, Daniel sat at his desk in the cramped administrative office, staring at a paycheck that barely covered rent. A fire ignited in his belly, not of anger, but of cold, hard resolve. He picked up his phone and called an old college friend, Marcus, who worked in high-risk venture capital. "Marcus," Daniel said, his voice steady. "I'm out." "Out of what?" Marcus asked. "Out of the slow lane. I'm quitting my job today. I have $20,000 in savings. My life, my retirement, Jacob's college fund. I want to invest it." "Daniel, don't be rash," Marcus warned. "The market is volatile right now. You could lose everything." "I've already lost everything that mattered," Daniel replied, looking at a photo of Jacob. "Money took my wife, Marcus. It took my happiness. So now, I'm going to master it. I don't want to be comfortable. I want to be untouchable." Daniel resigned that afternoon. He took his savings and, guided by Marcus, poured every cent into a fledgling tech startup and a series of volatile energy stocks. It was a gamble that should have destroyed him. For weeks, he stared at glowing screens, watching lines on a graph, sweating as the numbers dipped. But then the tide turned. The startup went public. The energy stock skyrocketed due to a global shortage. In 6 months, Daniel's $20,000 became $200,000. In a year it was $5 million. Daniel didn't stop to celebrate. He reinvested with a ruthless intelligence he didn't know he possessed. He worked 18-hour days, his mind sharp and unforgiving. He wasn't doing it for luxury. He was building a fortress. By the end of the second year, Daniel was a billionaire. He bought a mansion on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, not because he cared about the view, but because it was the kind of house Georgia had dreamed of. He filled it with servants, tutors for Jacob, and every toy imaginable. He gave Jacob the world, but Daniel himself remained a man of sorrow. He wore Italian suits like armor, his eyes cold and distant. He had conquered the game of wealth, but the victory felt hollow without the woman he had built it for. On the other side of the city, the glitter was fading from Georgia's life. Living with Chris was not the fairy tale she had imagined. The honeymoon phase had evaporated the moment she became fully dependent on him. Chris was no longer the charming seducer. He was the bored owner. "You're wearing that again?" Chris sneered one evening, looking at Georgia over the rim of his Scotch glass. They were in his penthouse, surrounded by opulence, but the air was thick with toxicity. "It's the dress you bought me last week," Georgia said, her voice trembling. She looked thinner, her eyes darting nervously. "I thought you liked it." "I liked it last week," Chris muttered, turning his attention back to his phone. "You're becoming boring, Georgia. You have no spark. No ambition. You just exist in my house. I exist here because I left my life for you." Georgia snapped, the frustration boiling over. "I left my husband. I left my son. And you won't even talk about marriage. You won't even let me meet your friends anymore." Chris stood up, his face darkening with rage. He walked over to her and gripped her chin, forcing her to look at him. Marriage? You think I'd marry a woman who abandons her child for a handbag? You're a gold digger, Georgia. A beautiful, expensive accessory. Don't confuse your position here. You are temporary. He released her with a shove and walked out, leaving her alone in the room. Georgia collapsed onto the velvet sofa, sobbing. The truth hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had traded a man who worshipped the ground she walked on for a man who treated her like a rental car. She was surrounded by millions of dollars, yet she had never been poorer. And somewhere in the city, unbeknownst to her, the husband she had called a failure was rising like a king. The climax of Georgia's delusion arrived on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, shattering her world with the violence of a thunderclap. She was lounging in the grand living room of what she believed was Chris's estate, sipping iced tea and barking orders at the housekeeping staff. She had learned to mask her misery with arrogance, pretending that she was the lady of the manor. Suddenly, the heavy oak front doors swung open. Georgia sat up, annoyed. She expected Chris, drunk and belligerent, but instead, a stranger walked in. It was a woman. She was stunning. Tall, slim, with glowing brown skin and an air of absolute, terrifying authority. She looked to be about 25, dressed in a sharp business suit that cost more than the car Georgia had arrived in. She walked into the room not like a guest, but like a conqueror. "Who are you?" Georgia demanded, standing up and setting her glass down hard. "How did you get past security?" "Guards. Get this woman out." The security guards, usually so responsive to Georgia's commands, didn't move toward the woman. Instead, they bowed their heads respectfully. "Welcome back, ma'am," the head of security said. Georgia froze. "Ma'am? What is going on?" The woman looked at Georgia with a mixture of pity and disgust. She didn't speak to her. Instead, she looked toward the staircase where Chris was descending. Chris froze on the landing. His face, usually flushed with arrogance, drained of all color. He looked like a ghost. "Liza," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Baby. You're back early from Paris." "Clearly," Liza said, her voice cool and sharp as a razor. "I came back to check on my investments. And instead, I find my husband playing house with a stray." Georgia felt the room spin. "Husband?" she whispered. She looked at Chris. "Chris, tell her. Tell her who you are." Liza laughed, a harsh, powerful sound. She walked over to the fireplace and picked up a vase, inspecting it for dust. "Oh, he hasn't told you? Chris doesn't own this house, darling. He doesn't own the cars. He doesn't even own the suit he's wearing. I do." She turned to Chris, her eyes blazing. "I inherited this empire. I built this fortune. You were just the pretty face I married against my father's advice. And now, you violated the infidelity clause of our prenuptial agreement. Again." "Liza, please," Chris begged, running down the stairs and falling to his knees. The billionaire facade crumbled instantly, revealing a pathetic, groveling coward. "It meant nothing. She means nothing. She's just some gold digger I found at a party. I love you." Georgia took a step back, the air leaving her lungs. You're broke?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He is worse than broke," Liza answered for him. "He is a beggar. And I am divorcing him. Today." She snapped her fingers at the guards. "Take his watch. Take his keys. And throw them both out. Now." "No!" Georgia screamed as a guard grabbed her arm. "I gave up everything. I have a son. I have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before you entered my home," Liza said coldly. The guards dragged them to the front gate and shoved them onto the dusty pavement outside the high walls. The heavy iron gate slammed shut with a final, booming clang. Chris scrambled up, dusting off his pants, and turned on Georgia with a face twisted by hate. "This is your fault," he screamed, spitting on the ground near her feet. If you weren't so needy, if you hadn't demanded so much attention, she wouldn't have found out. You cursed witch. My fault. Georgia sobbed, looking at the closed gates. You told me you were a billionaire. I left a good man for you. I left my child. You left a good man because you're greedy, Chris sneered, backing away. And now look at you. You have nothing. Don't follow me. He turned and walked away down the road, leaving Georgia standing alone on the sidewalk. The silence of the street was deafening. She had chased the illusion of gold and fallen off a cliff. She had no husband, no lover, no money, and no son. She fell to her knees on the concrete and screamed, a sound of pure, agonizing regret that echoed into the uncaring sky. Rain lashed against the pavement, soaking Georgia to the bone. She walked through the city like a ghost, her expensive dress ruined, her heels broken. She was homeless, hungry, and humiliated. In a cruel twist of fate, she passed a newsstand. There, on the front page of a business magazine, was a face she knew better than her own. It was Daniel. The headline read, "The Honest Billionaire. How Daniel Vance Conquered the Market." She stared at the image. He looked older, his eyes holding a profound sadness that pierced through the glossy paper. The irony brought her to her knees. She had left a billionaire to chase a beggar, thinking it was the other way around. Hope, desperate and selfish, flared in her chest. She remembered his love. She remembered how he used to look at her. She found her way to his estate, a sprawling mansion on the cliffs that dwarfed the home Chris had lived in. The security guard stopped her, but when Daniel saw her on the monitors, shivering, broken, and defeated, he ordered the gates opened. She entered his study, dripping water onto the Persian rugs. Daniel sat behind a mahogany desk, looking at her not with anger, but with a weary exhaustion. "Daniel," she sobbed, collapsing before him. "I was so stupid. I was blind. He tricked me. Please, I have nowhere else. I love you. I miss us." Daniel stood up slowly. He didn't rush to hold her. "You miss the comfort, Georgia. Not me. No. I miss you," she cried, reaching for his hand. "We can start over. You have everything now. We can have the life I always wanted." Daniel pulled his hand away gently. Tears welled in his eyes. "That's the tragedy, isn't it? I built all of this. For you. But to get it, I had to lose the part of me that you claim to love. And you? You didn't just break a promise, Georgia. You broke me from the inside. Please give me a chance," she begged. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but suddenly his breath hitched. A sharp, crushing pain radiated through his chest, like a fist squeezing his heart. He gasped, clutching his shirt. The stress of the betrayal, the years of relentless work, and the shock of seeing her was too much for his heart to bear. "Daniel!" Georgia screamed, rushing to catch him as he slumped forward. He fell to the floor, his face turning ashen. Servants rushed into the room, shouting for an ambulance, but Daniel grabbed Georgia's wrist. His grip was weak. He looked into her eyes one last time, seeing the woman he had loved more than life itself. "I have money. Everything," he whispered, his voice fading. "But I lost you. Now, I am leaving this world." His hand went limp. Daniel died on the floor of his empire, a billionaire with a broken heart. The reading of the will took place a week later. The room was silent. Jacob, now 12, sat with a stoic face, looking remarkably like his father. Georgia sat across from him, dressed in black, her face pale. The lawyer cleared his throat. "To my beloved son, Jacob, I leave 75% of my assets, my company, and my properties. You are the light that kept me going." Georgia held her breath. She expected nothing. "And to Georgia," the lawyer continued, "I leave 25% of my wealth. Not because she was a faithful wife, but because I loved her until my last breath." I do not want the mother of my son to be a beggar like the man she left me for. Georgia broke down in uncontrollable sobs. The final gift of his honesty crushed her. She had the millions she had sold her soul for, but she was entirely alone. She was rich in gold, but she would remain poor in happiness forever. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and hit the like button. It really helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. Thanks for watching.